I will never forget till my dying day an antic that one of my altar servers pulled many years ago. He was the type of kid that wasn't always willing to cooperate with people calling him to serve. The rules I had, of course, that I still have, with the servers today. If you can't make your mass, you have to do your best to try to get a substitute. And he knew that probably a lot of kids would not be willing to sub for him because he was never willing to sub for them. If they called, it was almost a lost cause. So he calls me one day and he says, "Father, I'm down to serve the 12 noon Mass on Sunday. I can't make the 12 noon, but I could make the 9. Do you know of someone who maybe would switch Masses with me?" So I looked at the schedule. Let's call this boy Billy, just to give him a name. And I looked and said, well, this other boy here, let's call him Robbie Smith. I said, Robbie is usually pretty amenable to that. Why don't you call Robbie and see if he'll switch with you? So he said, okay. So he picks up the phone and he calls over to Robbie's house and he gets Robbie's mother on the phone. And he says to her, "Hello, Mrs. Smith. Father Carosa wants me to switch Masses with Robbie. He wants Robbie to take the 12 noon and me to take the 9 o'clock Mass on Sunday." So his mother said, "Well, all right, if that's what Father wants, fine." So he calls me back and says, "He said he'd switch." I said, "Okay, great." I never would have been the wiser if Robbie didn't come to me and say, "Father, what was happening at this Mass today? Was there a special reason you wanted me on for this or Billy on for the 9? And I told him, "Well, no, he just needed a sub." I told him the whole story. And he says, "Well, that's not what he told my mother." And he mentioned to me what he mentioned to his mother. And I said to myself, "You little stinker." I raked him over the coals for doing that. However, I did have to give him credit for being enterprising, because I said, look how clever he was. He knew if he just called and said, "Will you switch with me or cover me?" they might have, in spite, because he never wanted to cover anyone else, say no. So he cleverly made this thing look like it was my will, and he knew they wouldn't deny that. Of course, I took rewards and privileges away from him for a long time. He didn't see any wedding or funeral where he would have gotten extra money for a long, long time after that. But at any rate, I always think of that when I hear this gospel parable, because Jesus, when he's talking about this wily steward, I think we can misunderstand what he's saying. The Lord is not saying it was great what this steward did, the wily steward. He gave him credit for being enterprising, for being clever in trying to make friends with this world's goods for himself to serve here in the world. He's not saying what he did was the right thing to do, but he said, look how clever it was. And he says that the children of this world are far more clever in dealing with the dishonest wealth of this world than children of the light are. And my friends, how true that is. If we look at our own lives and the lives of, even sometimes just in what we do, we can be so clever, so crafty and manipulating and get what we want. Some people young in the business world know exactly what to do, what to say, whom to befriend and everything so that they can quickly rise to the top. And they learn, they become masters at an early age of manipulation. And they know how to do that with the world's goods. But when it comes to God, in growing in holiness, it seems like we become absolute amateurs, that we have no idea how to grow closer to God. One of my favorite TV shows is Forensic Files. I can watch them over and over again, and I'm fascinated by how modern science and medical techniques and everything can solve crimes and figure out who committed a crime, sometimes on a single thread that was left behind, or all sorts of little things, pollen that was found at a site, or different type of dirt on the wheels of a car. I mean, it's just amazing what they can do. And I say, if they had those tools back in the 1800s, Lizzie Borden would either have been immediately convicted or exonerated, because they would have easily been able to find out whether or not she did what she did. But they didn't have it back then. But today, we can figure it out right away. Yet I look at the things, and when they tell the story of what the person did, I'm amazed at how clever they turn out becoming to try to get what they're looking for. And they'll plan things sometimes and plot them for years. In fact, I remember one story about a man who had been plotting his wife's murder for years, and he wanted to make sure he did that so he could get the insurance money that he would get when she had died. Of course, he made the fatal mistake of Googling online how to kill your wife and get away with it, and not realizing that they would be able to figure out what sites he had Googled, and that was one of the things that convicted him. But so clever with that. And why can't we be clever with the good things, the things that truly matter? I'm sure if any one of us needed money to buy something, let's say you saw a car that you just were dying to have, and you knew, well, I need to raise $10,000 more to get this car. You wouldn't just say, well, all right, I just need $10,000 more and kind of just expect it to miraculously show up in your mailbox one day. No, we'd sit down with a plan of how I'm going to go about and get that $10,000. What I'm going to do, maybe sell this, do some extra jobs, whatever it may be. And we'd have it all planned out so that we could get the car that we're looking for. But how often in our own lives we might say, I really want to grow closer to God. I really want to be a better person. I really want to be more prayerful. I really want to be holier. But then we do nothing to help make that come about. Well, if we want that, what do? Do we decide to pray more? To read more spiritual things? Come before the Blessed Sacrament? Give more time to the Lord in prayer? Look at our lives? Go to confession more frequently? What do we do concretely to help us grow in that good gift of wanting to be better people? Sometimes I think we just think that as long as we have the desire, that it's going to happen. Well, no, like anything else, we have to make that happen. So if we want to be holy, the first thing we have to do is look at our lives and see, where am I not holy? Where am I falling short? And then prayerfully before the Lord, ask Him to help us to plan some sort of a program or process by which we will overcome our sins and become the people that we want to be. And sometimes we may even notice that we don't even desire holiness. In fact, all we're looking for is more of the world's things. And God in our prayer simply becomes like Santa Claus, the one that we're going to just try to butter up and be good as we can, And every time we tell the children, Santa's watching, around this time of year they start trying to get better because we tell them, Santa is watching and, they want to be on Santa's good side, so he'll bring them everything they put on their list, figuring they can butter them up. And we'll do that to parents sometimes too. And sometimes we think that if we just can butter God up by being good enough, then He'll give us the things we're looking for. Or maybe we just pester Him enough that He'll give in. And we just pray about it constantly and whine and complain until we eventually get what we're looking for and say, Lord, give me this, give me this, give me this, give me this. And we get weary if He doesn't give it to us. And sometimes even find that we feel God is unjust because God's not giving us what we're asking for. But of course, God will give us things that are good and things that we need here, but maybe the things we're asking for are not good for us. And maybe we have to resign ourselves to say, well, maybe God is lovingly not giving me what I'm asking for because He knows it will destroy me. Sometimes we can just try to be manipulative with God and figure out how we can wheel and deal and be conniving and scheming to get from Him the things that we're looking for. And it's always a frustration because it never works. And sometimes even when we get the things from God that we're looking for, we discover they really didn't bring us the happiness we thought they were going to bring. And we discover, as St. Teresa of Avila once said, there are more tears shed over answered prayers than over unanswered ones. And sometimes the things we received ended up being nothing like we thought, in fact, only made things worse. And maybe the day finally comes where we discover that God is not the genie in the lamp. God is not here trying to just give us everything we're looking for, but rather God is here to purify us, to make us holy, to help us work with Him to reverse all of the effects of original sin and our own sins that turned everything upside down, that naturally has us greedy, looking for my own needs and everything I want, rather than looking to serve others and looking to serve God and be the holy people He has created us to be. And maybe the day might come when we finally get tired. We get tired of fighting with God and manipulating with Him, and maybe we hear something or think something and say, all right, God, fine. You want to do something different from me? You want to make me holy rather than rich? Okay, fine. I give in. I surrender. You win. And we surrender to God and start doing things His way, and we discover the sweetness of it. How much happier, how much more meaningful, how more rich, how more joyful our lives are because we're now receiving the gifts that God wants to give us. That honesty, that purity, that holiness of heart that is far better than winning the lottery or anything else that we often pray for. And we discover that the greatest thing we ever did was surrender to God. We realize it's such a sweet surrender when we surrender to God and we say, you fool, why didn't you do this years ago? Why did you not surrender to God? How could I ever refuse? I feel like I win when I lose. My friends, the greatest thing we could ever do is surrender ourselves totally and completely to God and say, Lord, you made me to serve you by serving others. Help me to be the person you created me to be. Don't make me pray or help me not to pray only for riches, only for other people to get their comeuppance, only for me to be vindicated and proven right, or all the things that we often pray for. But Lord, help me to be holy. Help me to be the person you created me to be. And then plan a program by how we can do that. By looking at the way we respond to people in our lives. By increasing our prayer time. By everything that we do to try to be more devoted to the Lord. And if we can put the same initiative into growing in holiness than we would put into growing in wealth, we will find indeed how rich we are. And we will realize, as the scriptures tell us, surrender to God and he will do everything for you. That indeed, surrendering to God is the greatest thing you and I could ever do. May Jesus Christ be praised, now and forever.